all of you. I feel deeply honored and privileged to have been given this opportunity to address you all on a women-centric issue that our society, very sadly, faces even in the 21st century and the ways to reform it. I believe man and woman stand equal in all walks of life, and I am glad to be sharing my views and opinions with you all in this regard. As women, we just need equal opportunities in all fields, enabling us to stand independent and establish an identity of our own. Since this event is being held in the honor of Mata Ahilyabai Holkar, therefore I deem it appropriate to say a few words about her also. Ahilyabai ruled over Indore in central India for almost 30 years. This has become almost legendary as a period during which perfect order and good governance prevailed and the people prospered. She was a very able ruler and organizer, highly respected during her lifetime and considered as a saint by the grateful people after her death. An English poem written by Joanna Bailey in 1849 reads, "For 30 years her peace, the land blessing did increase, and she was by every tongue, born and gentle, old and young. Yeah, even the children at their mother's feet are taught such homely rhyming to repeat. In latter days from Brahma came to rule our land a noble dame. Kind was her heart and bright her fame, and Ahilya was her honored name." She was a great Maratha lady who still affords the finest example of wisdom, goodness, and virtue. Here I would like to add that every female is bestowed with immense inherent power in herself by Mother Nature, but the irony of the system has made women seek refuge under the legal system to get their rights accepted and acknowledged by the society at large. Swami Vivekananda once said, "Just as a bird cannot fly with one wing, a nation cannot march forward if the women are left behind." An old Sanskrit saying, which has held relevance through centuries and continues to hold so, is "Yatra naryastu pujyante ramante tatra devata, yatra tastu na pujyante sarvastatrafala kriya." This means where women are honored, divinity blossoms, and where they are dishonored, all actions, no matter how noble the same may be, remain unfruitful. After 73 years of independence, and after 70 years since the inception of the world's largest written constitution, here we stand, still fighting for the women's rights. The country where goddesses are worshipped, but the women are still crying out for respect. What an irony, isn't it? All over the world, women were subjected to exploitations and unfair treatment, and these were so ingrained into the social mindset and system that a serious rethought or recognition of such a serious issue never gained attention for a pretty long time. Though the women have been bestowed with the inherent unique qualities such as compassion, patience, and capability to attain motherhood, and one can also not feign oblivion to their contribution to society, but in spite of these facts, they are amongst the most disadvantaged section of society. In our country, though on one hand, women are considered to be the epitome of Shakti, the power, but in fact, they are the ones who are never given their due respect. Women enjoyed a very respectable and honorable position in the society in ancient times, but our society progressed ironically. Yes, ironically, wherein the position of women kept on deteriorating over the time. History reveals that in Satyuga, women enjoyed a privileged position. They were treated as better halves, as Grahalakshmis. There were no bars or veil system. They used to participate widely in the religious and social affairs equivalent to men. This was indeed a golden era for women. Then came the Treta Yuga, and with the advent thereof, the world witnessed the production of Sita, which ultimately resulted in the tragic end of Ravana. Then Dwapar Yuga followed, and during this period, Draupadi was pawned, publicly depicted, and humiliated, which resulted in the advent of Chandigarh and in India, which lasted for nearly 500 years, saw a grave setback to the rights of women, which were inhumanely curtailed. They were confined to four walls, and their social participation went on a steep decline. Thereafter, there was a surge of Indian social reformers who rose to the occasion to do away with the several prevalent social evils and encouraged women to come forward their meaningful and active participation in all social spheres. The contributions of Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Jyoti Rao, Govind Rao Phule, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, Mahatma Gandhi, and Swami Vivekanand cannot be ever forgotten. A catena of reformative enactments were brought in to uplift the status of women even by our oppressive colonial rulers. Sati Pratha Abolition Act 1889, Hindu Widow Remarriage Act 1929, Child Marriage Restraint Act 1929, which was also popularly known as Sharda Act, Hindu Women Right to Property Act 1937 were some of the examples of such kind of legislation from pre-constitutional era. With the spread of education, the women gradually started realizing the importance as well as necessity of their role in the national movement and reconstruction of the new independent India. They actively participated in the freedom movement. To name a few prominent women revolutionaries, these were Annie Besant, Sarojini Naidu, Rani Lakshmi Bai, and Durga Devi Vohra. In the post independence era, a huge bundle of rights, immunities, and privileges have been conferred upon the Indian women. All the three pillars of the state have fully contributed in strengthening the status of women. The Constitution of India is a living and organic document which not only guarantees equality to women but also empowers the state to adopt special measures of positive discrimination in favor of women for neutralizing the cumulative socio-economic, educational, and political disadvantages faced by them since long. Fundamental rights, especially as enshrined in Articles 14, 15, and 16, amongst others, ensure equality before the law and equal protection of law, prohibition of discrimination against women on the grounds of religion, race, caste, gender, or place of birth, and the guarantee of equality of opportunity to all the women in the matters relating to employment. Besides the fundamental rights, the Constitution, through its directive principles of state policy, also strives to ensure adequate means of livelihood and equal pay for equal work under Article 39. Article 51A also imposes a fundamental duty on every citizen to renounce the practices which are derogatory to the dignity of women. Certain progressive means were included to ensure equal participation of women in the decision-making process in the democracy by way of 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution, which provide for the reservation of at least one-third seats for women in the panchayats as well as the municipalities. We are indeed grateful to the brains behind the progressive enactments which aim to empower the women of our country. For example, the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961, which is an attempt to deal effectively with the menace of dowry system, Maternity Benefit Act of 1961, which entitles a women employee to get maternity leave, medical allowances, and nursing breaks, etc. Equal Remuneration Act of 1976, which provides for payment of equal recompense to men and women workers. The Indecent Representation of Women Prevention Act was brought in 1986, which prohibits the indecent representation of the women through advertisement or in publications, writings, paintings, figures, or in any other manner. Then, in 1990, National Commission for Women's Act was enacted, by virtue of which a statutory body called the National Commission for Women was established to protect the rights of the women in India and provide a voice for their issues and concerns. The acts, such as the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2006, which came into force in the year 2007, renders the marriage of the girls below the age of 18 years and the boys below the age of 21 years as punishable. Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition, and Redressal Act of 2013 sought to ensure women's safety and their protection from sexual harassment at their places of work. All these legislative measures have helped to empower the women and have sought to secure to them the equal rights and standing in the society. Gender equality has always been an elusive concept in the history, trodden with impediments of narrow-mindedness of the society, which took fiendish delight in suppressing the women's rights. Judiciary, being the custodian of the rights of the citizen, woke up to the need of the hour to safeguard and protect the rights of the women, to free them from the shackles of the age-old vicious traditions and conservative mindsets of the society at large for them. The earliest case in India pertaining to the rights of women was Dattatreya versus State, wherein it was held that the educational institutions established by the state exclusively for women or the reservation of seats for women in a college do not violate Article 15(1). Then, in the path-breaking judgment rendered by Honorable Supreme Court titled as Air India versus Nargesh Mirza, it was held that the regulation of Air India pertaining to the termination of the services of an air hostess, if she were to get pregnant within 4 years of service, was arbitrary and unconstitutional. This judgment is etched in the history of women's rights as an apostle for organizations to regulate the working conditions of women employees at par with their male counterparts. The landmark judgment, as handed down in the case titled as Vishakha and others versus State of Rajasthan and others, is another step forward towards the protection of working women, wherein the court laid down certain guidelines to regulate the condition of the working women. and directed that these guidelines and norms would be strictly observed in all workplaces for preservation and enforcement of the right to gender equality of working women. This verdict culminated in the Act of 2013, which I have already mentioned. Further, in Ms. Geetha Hariharan and another versus Reserve Bank of India and another, it was held that both the parents, the father as well as the mother, are the natural guardians of a minor Hindu child, and the mother cannot be said to be natural guardian only in the eventuality of the demise of the father, as that would not only be discriminatory but also against the welfare of the child, which is the pivotal purpose for legislating the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act of 1956. Equal rights and dignity of women in religious aspects has recently garnered great importance in social life and in the legal sphere. In Shaira Bano versus Union of India, it has been held that the practice of triple talaq is unconstitutional and violates the fundamental rights of Muslim women. The majority also found that the practice of triple talaq is not essential to Muslim religion. Then, in Sabrimala temple entry case, titled as Indian Young Lawyers Association versus State of Kerala, the Honorable Apex Court held that the temple's practice of excluding women was unconstitutional. It was also held that the practice violated the fundamental right to freedom of religion for female worshippers. Then, in the recent case of Vinita Sharma and versus Rakesh Sharma, the apex court, after discussing the law of creation of Mitakshara Koparsinary and the nature of the rights of the members of a Koparsinary under the Hindu law, proceeded to hold the right of the daughters under the Amending Act of 2005 to be retroactive rather prospective. Then, in Secretary, Ministry of Defense versus Babita Punia, Honorable Supreme Court upheld the principle of equality and observed that the women officers are eligible for permanent commission in defense services. The law undoubtedly has been the custodian of women's rights since long, but the concern is whether these legislative measures and judicial responses are enough to secure the women their inherent but lost rights. The answer to this question is partly yes and partly no. Yes, the legislative measures grant express rights to the women, and judicial responses ensure that these measures are contemporarily suitable. But the problem lies in our social setup, which is still reluctant and has a lackadaisical approach to the progressive changes. Education, I believe, is the most effective measure to awake the masses. By education, I mean effective education, both at the academics as well as parental level. Then, social awareness towards women's rights can act as a major influencing mode. The need of the society as a whole is to realize that gone are the days where the permanent fate and mission of a woman was only to fulfill the noble and benign duty as wife and mother. It is much more. A woman can effectively manage both her household as well as her professional responsibilities whatsoever. Till the time the women won't raise their voice, the legislations and the judicial responses cannot make much difference. It is about time that women stand up for their own rights, which can be achieved by securing education coupled with financial independence. Last but not the least, the legislature, the judiciary, and the society have to join hands together to work for the comprehensive development of our nation. Women make up to almost half of the population, And it is in our own interest and welfare that the women receive their long lost inherent rights to the fullest. I would like I would further like to add that women are already empowered. The only concern is that they need conducive environment to identify, acknowledge, and activate their inherent power. History proves that whenever the women have been given the opportunity, they have excelled, performed at par with men. The latest example being the recent recruitment of judicial officers in the states of Punjab and Haryana, where women have surprisingly outnumbered the men. We must become the part of the legacy that Rani Ahilyabai, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Savitri Bai Phule, and many such crusaders have left for us. I would like to end my views by remarking that be the change you want to see. Thank you. Have a wonderful and thoughtful evening ahead.